This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. We're going to provide clarity on something that is so important to many families as well. When somebody becomes addicted to something or a substance, whatever it may be, there's a lot of misconceptions and mixed messages that go along with that, especially when it involves the family. We're going to focus on the Family Recovery Solution. That's the name of his practice, thefamilyrecoverysolution.com. He does focus on the family and how it affects them and so much more. He is Jeff Jones, back on the program. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I am well. Thanks, Steve.
Appreciate you being here. There's a lot to talk about here, and especially with the mixed messages that come up about addiction in the family. And I'm sure you deal with all the time. I got to imagine in the people that you work with and talk to, you must encounter this very often where they think one thing, let's say the family thinks one thing about their loved one who's addicted, and they may be so far off base, but it's all based on messages they've heard, on radio, TV, or, movies or whatever it might be, right?
Well, and there's like a mainstream message in the culture, and then we have our own culture, we have our own experiences, and the two different quick little stories is the dad who has a 15-year-old son, and his son is smoking pot, and the dad's saying, you can't smoke pot, it's not good for you. But the dad has his own marijuana habit, and he goes out in the garage and smokes pot. So it's a mixed message to the son, big time. And even if the dad lives in a state where marijuana is legal, then another story, like a Quaker family whose son starts smoking cigarettes, and they call an interventionist, and they want to do an intervention on their son because he's smoking cigarettes. And the interventionist could say something like, well, that's kind of normal for 15-year-old boys. Call me if it escalates to drugs and alcohol. So, our national organizations, we have a specific definition of addiction. Different organizations have different definitions, but then it's like we all have our own experiences, and our own experiences really guide us more than national definitions of addiction. So it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly.
And perception is reality. So, you might call it one thing, somebody else calls it something else. As I understand it, way back in the day, people were treated with addiction, and they were shamed. They were shamed.
Yeah. I mean, put in stockades, thrown tomatoes at them, flogging, shamed. Yeah, I agree.
Isn't it amazing the language that's used now? The word addict. Now, think of movies. And when somebody says in a movie, Jimmy's an addict, right away you've got a picture of something in your mind. And we don't even have to go into the picture. It already instantly comes up. But that word is still used today. Yeah.
And I mean, there's people in like Alcoholics Anonymous or something, and they've been in that program for a long time. They're successful with it. It's helpful for them, and they call themselves an addict, and that is empowering for them, I guess. But for me to refer to someone else as an addict, that does not feel like I'm empowering them. So it's complicated.
I heard something recently that when somebody has an addiction, they never say, I recovered. It's always, I'm in recovery. Is that true?
Well, with AA, it is like I'm a person in long-term recovery.
Hmm.
And then I know other people and people that work, there are, probably 10 treatment centers around the country that I know that have a bio-nutritional approach. And they will not use that language. They will use what you just said, recovered with an ED on the end of it.
Hmm.
So it's a matter of perspective, and then under that is belief.
And that's the belief of the person who's going through the challenges and the family.
Well, it's the belief of the person who has the addiction, and if they go into AA, they are going to have the belief that they are an addict, and they
Hmm.
just need to admit that.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of every meeting, it's like, "Hi, my name's Jeff. I'm an addict," as an example. And where therapists like myself, I was a therapist for decades. I hear that as, me kind of bringing in negative self-talk to myself and limiting how I see myself.
So,
So I don't support that. I don't
hmm.
call people an addict. If that empowers them, it's fine for them to call themselves that, but I use the term individual in addiction.
Hmm.
And there's a national organization called Research Recovery Institute. They have a thing called the Addictionary, and quite a bit of information in there to reduce stigma. And addict is one
Hmm.
of those terms that's stigmatizing, and they use like person-centered language, which would be like a person with a substance use disorder. And so substance use disorder, that's kind of politically correct language. And but I don't like the disorder language. For me, there's so many little nuances to all of this stuff. I I could probably be confusing things more, Steve, and with mixed messages, I like to try to clarify mixed messages, which almost well, it gets challenging, especially in a
Sure.
conversation like this.
Well, even language. Now, if you look at uh, therapy in general, what
Yeah.
what the language you use, even what you think, becomes what you are. So if you're using these terms, you're essentially just beating on yourself and not even know it. Um,
Yeah.
can we look at the individual, somebody who is going through addiction, that individual, and the family? A lot of times it's viewed in society. It's like, oh, well, that's their problem. They need to get that fixed, and it doesn't focus on the family's impact and what they're going through.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's a big deal.
Well, yeah, and that happens all the time.
Mm,
And that has happened for centuries. That it's that one person, they have the problem, they need to fix it. And I think part of that is, the thinking about the chemical hooks theory. It's
mm,
the problem is that that drug or alcohol, that chemical is hijacking the brain for that one person. And they, use that language. And I use that language when I did intervention many years ago and talking to families. I myself would use that language before the intervention and after the intervention to explain to the family what I thought was going on. Much later, I learned after reading the book Chasing the Scream by Johan Hari, who is an investigative journalist who spent 3 years kind of traveling around the world talking to people about addiction. What he uncovered, well, he ended up with Dr. Bruce Alexander, who created this thing called Rat Park. And he is a professor, or he was a professor at Simon Fraser University in Canada. And he wrote the book. It's like a frigging textbook, The Globalization of Addiction, the Poverty of Spirit. And essentially, what he learned in doing this rat park experiment is that rats in cages, they had the option to drink plain water or water with morphine. And they would exclusively, or pretty much, go for the water with morphine. And which led to the chemical hooks thinking that's the problem. And what Bruce Alexander did is he created this rat park, this big, place where rats could just kind of play around. There was tunnels and water and lots of rats, and they could socialize and have sex together and do all the fun things that rats would do. And they had the same thing. They had the morphine water and plain water, and they rarely went for the morphine water. And so the thinking there was that the cage that they were in influenced their desire to go for plain water or the morphine water. And it's about, his theory is that the society, the culture that we're in, has an impact on the individuals, increases their stressors, and then they need to find a way to cope. And we all know that drugs and alcohol will change our state, our feeling very quickly. Are you connecting the dots here, or what's missing?
I'm getting it. And I know that you focus more on the brain than many usually do when it comes to addiction. And you've referenced before bionutritional needs. Can we look at that? Because a lot of times, the 12-step program,
Yeah.
that's what everybody talks about when it comes to addiction. And I believe
Right.
you said before that there is this value in that. It's helped many. However, we don't look at the brain and what the function and what's going on and what the brain actually
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah. So it's interesting with the brain because AA AA's been around since 1935, and I really need to say that it has saved a lot of people's lives.
Hmm.
It's all over the world, and it's social connection, it's community, it's
Yep.
people that don't bullshit one another.
Yep.
It's like-minded people. These people have these social connections that Bruce Alexander was talking about when they go to AA meetings. However, AA meetings have caffeine, they have nicotine, they have sugar there. And what we have learned about addiction is that the drug or alcohol carves out a pathway, a reward pathway in the brain. So once like the ruts in the road, the ruts in that pathway get deep enough, it's going to be easy to do that same behavior over and over and over again,
Mm.
specifically if we have the same stressors, even though we might not be getting the same high, we'll go back for more. And that's what's referred to as tolerance, you know. Um, so on one level, a lot of the brain research, there's a lot of brain research, and that's paid for and funded by pharmaceutical companies, and the solutions generally lean on new medications,
Mm.
and so the brain is impaired. That is a part of it. However, it's both repairing the brain, which mainstream is the pharmaceutical medications, which I see that as toxic and potentially addictive. And I go, why not use non-toxic, non-addictive substances as a first line of defense, i.e., nutrient-dense food, amino acids, supplements? That's what I refer to as bionutritional healing.
Fundamentally speaking, here you refer to AA meetings and sugar, nicotine, and things like that being available during the meeting and the program.
Yeah.
Again, I'm talking fundamentally, but I want to really, for all of us to understand what's going on here. Could those trigger the addiction or foster the addiction goal and feeling? Even though it's just sugar, I'm gonna have a can of Coke, whatever.
Yeah. So, yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that, but yes.
Mm,
And it's like once the drugs or alcohol kind of carve out a reward pathway in the brain, then when you don't give the brain that reward, which I'm referring to reward as drugs and alcohol, the the brain needs to get that somewhere. And so sugar is very readily available. And I've had clients who say, my AA sponsor tells me to carry around a pocket of Jolly Ranchers and have some M&Ms. And if I feel like drinking, then I'm just to eat sugar. And that amps up the blood sugar. And that does, quote unquote, temporarily solve the problem in that moment. It doesn't heal the reward pathway, which amino acids and supplements can do. And they're not going to do this in a week. And not everyone has the same need and depth of healing needed in their brain. So there's a
mm.
lot of very individualized stuff here. And I could say a little bit more, but I'm hesitant because I don't want to complicate it. Could you summarize and like what you heard me say to like what's the clear message here? And that'll help me to understand where the gaps are.
Well, what I'm receiving here is there's much more going on within the brain and mixed messages, and it's often ignored in terms of the brain chemistry and the function of the brain. It's not looked at. A lot of times, again, the perception, 12-step program,
Right.
recapping some of the things here. It's on the person who's addicted, not the family. These are all, myths. And you go deep in terms of bionutrition. Can we look at that, the nutrition? Because
Yeah,
that
sure,
seems radically important. And
sure.
if you go back to Socrates, food is thy medicine. Um,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
here's the fun I had thought of the other day. When you're taking a prescription from your doctor, you'll make sure you got that right. Okay, doc, I want to make sure like 3 times a day and make sure I don't have dairy products next to this. And how long do I take it for? You'll get specifics, but then you'll open up a bag of chips and other things and pound it away. Food is thy medicine. You're throwing that in your
yeah,
body. Did you call a doctor and ask him, hey, I'm going to have Fritos and all these other things? No, you're not. But you're ingesting it. It's your nutrition. It's affecting you in different ways. I have to believe. Call it psychiatric nutrition. That's affecting the way your brain works.
yes, yes. And there is a role called nutritional psychiatrist or psychiatric nutrition. That is an
Mm,
actual role. And there
wow.
are psychiatrists out there who have gone to school to become a psychiatrist, and then they've gone back to school to really learn the functional medicine, and they become a functional medicine doctor.
Sure.
And so these nutritional psychiatrists, they can actually, and this is especially helpful for people who have a lot of mental health diagnosis on top of an addiction. And so they can do an assessment and work up a protocol, and then a nutritional recovery life coach can carry that out, and that nutritional psychiatrist can stay engaged to consult, like, how
Mm,
are things going?
wow.
Because the nutritional recovery life coach is going to use that protocol, and the protocol could have pharmaceutical medications on it and amino acids
Mm,
and supplements, both. And and like the pharmaceutical medications, I don't have the expertise to do that myself. I do have the expertise to use amino acids and talk about nutrient dense food. And it seems simple and it gets so complicated. I've had so many people tell me, but Jeff, I have a good diet. And then they will relapse. And one of the first questions I ask when I see someone who is relapsed is, think back to that day, and when was the last time that you had food before that relapse? And Steve, I've only been doing this for about the last 7 or 8 years, but and this is anecdotal, but every time the person has said, "Wow, come to think of it, I didn't eat that day," or it had, like, I didn't relapse and until that evening,
mm.
and I had a little bit of food, you know, 6 hours prior, or something. So there's a whole protocol there, and actually I can give the website. My mentor, and I'll mention her name. Her name's Christina Vasilok. She has the website eatingproteinSavesLives.org. And so there's quite a bit of free information on there about food. She also has the website aminoacidtherapy.com. She has trained several hundred professionals, therapists, doctors, people who just have interest, people who have, like, tried and tried all kinds of different things. And then they learned about this and they just wanted their own training for themselves to where they could have a better understanding. And they still may have a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath who is also a team member for them to guide them. So it isn't just, here, let me do this one thing for you and you're going to be all fixed up. It's not like that.
There's so many components that go into it, and thank you for sharing that. The things that we minimize or we don't understand, even hydration. I'll bet
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
people who relapse, even if you talked about, what did you drink today? What did you have? Oh, I had a glass of water this morning. That was about it. My gosh.
So here's a takeaway for everybody, whether they have an addiction or not, and that is, we should drink half of our body weight in ounces every day. So for 100-pound person, like half of 100 is 50. 100-pound person should have 50 ounces of water every day.
Yeah. I've heard the same exact thing. And it's mind boggling when you think about how much you should consume. And yeah, we'll factor in, if you have soup, there's a little bit of water in that. So you can't discount that because it is part of your hydration. But there's a lot there. I mean, people have brain fog and just can't even function
Yeah.
and don't know
Yeah.
kids having trouble in school and they're irritable and they don't know what it is. It comes down to that. Final thought, in terms of nutrients and minerals and vitamins. I did labs a year ago and it came back with the lowest level of vitamin D they've ever seen. And when I started tracing back, I was like, I feel a little lethargic, a little brain foggy. And then, and it was an easy fix. One pill a week, 50,000 units, and a couple of weeks and boop, back on track. But as I researched it, Jeff, I learned that vitamin D is responsible for the absorption of many other vitamins. So it's not just you're missing one, you're missing many. So it's like a chain reaction. So all of these things need to be looked at, especially coming from the place of addiction.
Yeah.
We're out of time. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
So my focus with families, I am doing this master class, the second session, which is free, and they're more than, able to come into this Saturday. And I am focusing on families because families, their brain has the best capacity to actually take in this information we've been talking about, mixed messages and the bio-nutritional support. So family members can use that themselves for the symptoms that they experience living with addiction. And the addiction is a family disease kind of language, which I don't really like. It's a very close jump to, oh, I have a disease because I have a family member who has an addiction, and therefore I should get pharmaceutical medications as a first line of defense to deal with my inability to sleep at night or my worry and concern for my addicted loved one. So I'm trying to educate families first to where they can start to understand some of this. And then when it's the right time, they can have new conversations with their addicted family member or their family member in early recovery.
Well, even on the lowest level, if you're supporting somebody who's addicted, the family is connected. Hon, did you drink something today? Things like that can also be part of it. Masterclass, all the details, thefamilyrecoverysolution.com is where to go. Jeff, thank you for all the insight. Thank you for reframing a lot of this and bringing clarity to some of these mixed messages. A lot of this we've been holding on to for many years and not fully understanding what's going on. And I appreciate that. Looking forward next time we get together.
Thank you, Steve.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.